What's up, guys? It's me, Tony G, coming to you from MGM National Harbor. This is episode 79 of my vlog. In this episode, we're here to play some cash. Some people have been asking me, why don't you go to a different casino to play a little bit of cash or tournaments? There are no tournaments here at MGM right now, so we're just going to play a little bit of cash, get in the 1-3 game, and hopefully I run well and we do well. And I'm going to try to be aggressive. I heard the games are really very aggressive here and there's a lot of action. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Here we go. Real quick, guys, before we get really into the episode, if you're new here, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and that bell notification. It really helps out the channel. And if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button. And if you guys are returning subscribers, appreciate you coming back. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let's get into it. Okay, in the very first hand after we sit down, I'm under the gun with the ace of spades and the 7 of diamonds. I make it $10 to go. The small blind folds, the big blind calls, and middle position calls, and we're 3 ways to the flop. The flop comes out the 9 of spades, the 7 of hearts, and the 5 of diamonds. The big blind goes all in. I ask for a count. She says it's $53. So I put in 55 for the call and the middle position calls, and we're still 3 ways to the turn. And the turn is the Queen of Hearts. Now, this doesn't change too much for me, obviously, but the big blind had $1 left, and he decides to throw it all in there for $1. I laugh and call, and the middle position calls. The river is the King of Clubs. I check it since there's no more action on the big blind, and the middle position checked. We show down. My 7s aren't any good. The middle position had the King of Diamonds, the 9 of Diamonds, and we lose our first hand. Okay, about an orbit later, I have the King of Spades, the Jack of Spades. I'm in the small blind. I have about 205 in my stack. The under the gun bets 10. The cutoff and the button call, I make it 20 to go. The big blind, the cutoff, the under the gun, and the button all call. So we're 4 ways to the flop, and the flop comes out the 7 of clubs, the 9 of clubs, and the 4 of hearts. I'm the first one to act, and I throw out a bet of $25. The big blind calls, the cutoff folds, and the button folds. So we are heads up to the turn. The turn is the 10 of spades. It's now throwing a better straight draw on the board for me. So I decide to throw out a decent sized bet of $60. The big blind thinks for a second, but ultimately does call. And the river comes the Jack of Clubs, giving me top pair on the board. So I decide to just go ahead and rip it all in there. And he snap calls and we flip him over. He shows ace 4 for a pair of 4s with a flush draw. And my jack, pair of jacks, wins it. Take down a decent sized pot. Okay, in this next hand, I have the 7 of clubs, the 9 of clubs. I am in the big blind. There are 3 limpers to me, and I decided to make it $12 to go. The under the gun calls The button calls, and so does the small blind, and we are 4 ways to the flop. The flop is the 8 of hearts, the 10 of hearts, and the queen of spades. I throw out a bet of $15. The under the gun and the small blind calls, the button does fold. The turn is the jack of clubs, and I throw out a bet of $35. The under the gun tanks for 15 or 20 seconds. He keeps looking at me. He asked the dealer, can I see his chips? Because he couldn't quite see my chips because I was right next to the dealer. He does decide to call the $35 bet after he asks for a count. And then the small blind puts his chips out and calls. And the river is the 6 of spades. Now, I threw out a bet of $45. I was thinking about putting out $60, but after the under the gun tanked, I didn't think he would call $60. So I just make it $45 to go. The small blind is thinking for a minute and decides to go ahead and fold his cards. And the under the gun flips over 4 of diamonds, 5 of clubs, and then I flip over my higher straight, and we take down a decent sized pot there. Okay, about an orbit later, I honestly just decide I'm going to try to bluff with the ace of hearts, the 6 of hearts. So yes, I do limp into the pot. I know you're not supposed to limp into any pot, but I decided, what the hell, people have been kind of fishy around here today, so I decided to limp in. The small blind calls the $3, and the big blind checks his option. We are now 4 ways to the flop, and the flop comes out the jack of diamonds, the ace of diamonds, and the 4 of hearts. Obviously, I connect nowhere. It checks to me. I bet $12. The small blind thinks for a second or so and decides to go ahead and throw in the $12. And the big blind folds. We're heads up to the turn. And the turn, again, absolutely helps him with nothing. It's the king of diamonds. It checks around to the river, which is the 3 of clubs. I throw out a bet of $30. The small blind thinks for a good 15-20 seconds, but ultimately decides to fold. And we get a bluff through there and take down a smaller pot with the ace 6 of hearts. Okay, in this hand I have the 2 of diamonds and the deuce of spades. I'm in the small blind and gets to the cutoff. He makes it $12 to go. The button folds, and being aggressive like I said it was going to be, I decide to make it $22. The middle position is thinking for a second. You see him with his arms folded there with the polo shirt on. He picks up his chips and says, okay, let's go, call. And to my surprise, as the cutoff is shuffling his chips, he says, make it 45. So I'm thinking, okay, wow, he's got to have aces or kings. But I'm feeling a little froggy today and aggressive. So like I said, I decide to call the 45. The middle position folds his hand, and finally, after all the betting, we are heads up to the flop. The flop comes out very favorable for us. It's the king of hearts, the 2 of hearts, and the 10 of diamonds. I slide out a bet of 105, The cutoff tanks after the dealer counts out the money, and he's shuffling his chips, and I so want him to make a call here as he's tanking. And not only does he make a call, he stacks all his chips up and decides to go all in for a total of 207, 102 more to me. I snap call, and the turn is the 7 of clubs and the 4 of diamonds. I give him the peace sign, flip my cards over, and that's all for him, folks. And we take down a very awesome sized pot. It's probably the biggest pot I've played in a good year and a half or so as far as cash goes. Alright, in the very next hand, the rich keep getting richer. I have the queen of diamonds, the queen of hearts. I'm on the button. The middle position calls and the cutoff calls, and I decide to make it $15 to go. Everyone on the table except for under the gun calls the 15. So it's almost a family pot, but not quite. We are 6 ways to the flop, and the flop comes out the jack of clubs, the 10 of spades, and the king of spades. And it checks to middle position. Cutoff checks. I throw out a bet of $30. Everybody else at the table folds, and it gets back to the middle position there. The same guy got in the last hand with, directly across from me. He's counting out some chips and decides to re-raise to 60. The cutoff folds, and with pocket queens, I'm not going anywhere. I decide to count out my chips, say I call, and we are now heads up to the turn. The turn is the 8 of diamonds, and believe it or not, it actually checks to the river. The river is the wonderful 9 of diamonds, giving me the straight. I throw out a bet of $100, and the middle position across from me there tanks for 10 or 15 seconds, but ultimately he can't let it go and throws in 1 black chip. And then I turn my hand over, and he sees the bad news, and he mucks his cards face down. Never told me what he had. Okay, in the last notable hand of the session, I have the jack of diamonds, the jack of spades. I am under the gun. I do straddle for $6. The button and the small blind calls. The big blind thinks for a second and decides to shove it all in there, which really isn't a lot. It's a total, I think, $28. Obviously, with pocket jacks, I'm not going anywhere. We are 4 ways to the flop with 1 side pot, obviously, and the flop is the 9 of spades, the king of hearts, and the 4 of clubs. It checks it to me. I bet $20. The big blind, the button thinks for a minute. He counts out his chips and decides to call. And so does the small blind. Obviously, there is no action on the big blind because he's all in. The turn is the queen of spades. I now am hoping for the straight. I have a pair of jacks, and I don't feel too confident. Yet I cut out some chips, and I make it $40 to go. The button throws another 40 in there to make it 80. The small blind tanks and then folds. My gut's telling me not to call, but I just can't give up the jacks. And I cut out $40 more in chips, and I call. And the river is just a brick. It's a lowly little 2 of diamonds. And I decide to check it, basically giving up. And he does down bet, which I want to say traps me, but it kind of got me all twisted up in the head like a pretzel. And yeah, I decided to just go ahead and call the $50, even though my gut tells me I'm no good here. And he flips over King 10, and he basically just gets me with a pair of kings with a straight draw himself. And yeah, we lose that pot. And a couple hands later, we pack it up and call it a successful day.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, do me a favor. Hit that like and subscribe button. Leave me a comment down below. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. And don't forget, it doesn't matter how you're living your life, as long as you're living the felt life.